friends, and welcome to another reading wrap up. Today I am doing my March reading wrap up because March is over, or just about. So for this wrap up, I cannot lie, I did not read a lot of things physically simply because I traveled in the middle of the month and then I was just busy with work and finding a work-life balance, but that is okay. A lot of these books are at the library, so it was a really easy, free way for me to listen to them. But I also found some new favorites in here. So let's talk about the books I read. First and foremost, I will say I did DNF 2 books this month, I think. Yes, I DNF 2 books. One being Envy, which is in my for sale box. So it's in the for sale box, mainly because it was a 285 page book and I had a really hard time getting into it. And that should say something about the pacing of this book. Also, so I read almost all of it. I mean, I skimmed some parts. But the whole premise of the book is that there's these 2 twins who possess kind of a supernatural ability after experiencing a near-death accident when they were kids. And everyone else died except for them, the 2 twins, and their mom, and one other girl and her mom. So there's some survivor's guilt there, but also it just wasn't getting to the point. Like, I think there was a reveal that was a little bit too soon. If that, you were just kind of like, okay, when are we gonna find out the next step? Or like, how are we gonna find out that this person was involved? And that kind of killed the momentum when you stopped finding out clues. So I ended up just putting that and Betrayal in the box. So when I do an unhaul, those will be in there, but they are also up for sale now on my Pango. If you want to see them, my Pango will be listed down below so that you guys can check out what books I'm selling. After that, though, I listened to a definite new favorite that the pacing was magnificent. Even though it's not super long. How many pages is this? It's 350, actually it's more than that, 368 pages, if you don't count like the book club notes, and that is Flight Girls. This is about female pilots who aided in World War II. They were never sent overseas. They worked and trained people in the military here in the United States. And I don't think until Obama was in office did they get any sort of recognition. They were never considered actually a formal part of the military. They were like subcontractors, as we would call them now. And then when the military didn't need them anymore, they just were like, okay, you're done, and sent them back to crop dusting fields and flying little delivery planes and stuff. And that's what they did with the rest of their lives. So this one follows a group of women in Hawaii, and then Pearl Harbor happens, and we just kind of follow this one woman as she deals with losing friends in training accidents and Pearl Harbor. It's definitely historical fiction because there's some things that maybe inspired by true stories, but definitely weren't like 100% accurate. And yeah, there's a love story in here, and there's just some different things about what it means to be a woman who falls in love with somebody who's also in the military when you're in the military, what that can mean for you, and you know, just all those sort of social dynamics. But this was super good, and listening to it was really fun because there was kind of this transatlantic accent in there at certain times. That was really nice. So then one that I didn't realize I could access on audio from the library, but could, was Meet Me at the Cupcake Cafe. I talked about in the TBR video that this was going to be an emotional month, and this book most certainly was. This one, I will say, was pretty Hallmark movie-esque. However, it had a little bit more substance to it. We have Izzy, who is a woman who works in, she's she's not a secretary, but she works in an office that and they end up doing job cuts. They end up laying her off because she is considered a redundancy, and I think it's a real estate company. But she's involved with the kind of like head guy who is just very jerky and like Mr. Big Shot. He has to have all this residential land so that's how he shows how amazing he is. You know what? Like, he's a jerk. So they're dating in secret because you can kind of tell he doesn't think of her as like good enough for him, but she's available, so he takes it. But she decides she's going to open a bakery after she gets fired, and she ends up making these really fun friendships. There is kind of this nerdy banker who's a single parent, and they develop kind of a relationship. And then, of course, Mr. Jerk comes back in the picture and wants to take away the cafe, and how are they going to, you know, keep the Cupcake Cafe and everything like that. But it's super cute. I mean, listening to it on audio, I think definitely helped me get through it, just because there are a few chapters where it kind of lulls. And in this too, Izzy's grandfather is writing recipes for her, and they actually read the recipes throughout. There's like different recipes for different situations, and he's sending them to her because he has Alzheimer's and he's slowly losing his memory. So you get some of that in here as well. And it's just a really sweet book. Oh, I didn't even give you star ratings. So I didn't even star rate Envy because I didn't finish it. Flight Girls, I gave a 5, and this one I gave a 4. Then we have a new favorite book of the year. I also listened to this one on audio because I had it on Libby, if you guys are looking for it on audio, and it is done. It's not a full cast, but there's definitely more than one voice doing the narration, and that is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This follows the Riva kids, who are one of Evelyn Hugo's ex-husband's children. And this book took me for such a wild ride, because you go from like, it starts, this all happens within 24 hours, but with flashbacks. So this one starts in 1983 in August, and it's from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is part 1. And that is basically this party that Nina Riva, the oldest Riva sister, has every year. She has this huge blowout at her big Malibu house because she is a model. And, you know, people just go nuts. And it's got all these celebrities, and there's all this, like, lore. And it's, like, very infamous, very notorious. People want to go. People just show up kind of thing. But we find out, like, the history of each of the Riva kids. Like, why Kit doesn't feel comfortable around boys, and wants, like, she knows she can be just as good of a surfer as her brother. And her oldest brother is a professional surfer, but he has a heart condition and might not be able to surf anymore. And then his little brother is his photographer, but he's also in a relationship with his ex-girlfriend. So there's a lot of interesting family dynamics here, but you also explore, like, being the oldest, having to hold everything together, and you see the parents meeting and kind of find out how Mick Riva got to be the way he was in Evelyn Hugo. So I gave this book 5 stars because the pacing was amazing, and the fact that it takes place in 24 hours with some flashbacks. I mean, it was a fairly quick listen. So definitely enjoyed that. I'm still working on A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire just because that book is so long. So I will throw the thoughts for that one in the April wrap up, or I'll cut away right here to editing me talking about it. So I did DNF another book, and that was Flamecaster by Cinda Williams Chima. That one I listened to about 10% of on audio and just didn't get intrigued. I even got to like a good part and was kind of like, not into this Chosen One stuff. I don't like these very generic kind of fantasy lines, and I know it's an older book, so it's hard to say like who set up who, but I just wasn't feeling it, and I wasn't feeling the whole series, and it seemed like there was a lot of moving pieces to kind of put together right within 57 pages. So I decided the series just isn't for me, and I'm moving on from the idea of reading it. So I DNF'd that one. Now, let's talk about the last book I listened to, because I'm reading Kingdom of Flesh and Fire physically, because I read Blood and Ash physically. All the Little Lights. I was wrong in what I told everyone this book was about. It is a second chance romance. There's Elliot and Catherine. They're in Oklahoma, so the narrators had Oklahoma accents. Elliot is a kid whose he comes from kind of a troubled home. His parents fight, his dad's very abusive, and he spends his summers with his aunt. And when he's 15, he meets Catherine, who is the daughter of these, like, this disgrace oil heiress. These two meet one day and become very quickly kind of infatuated with each other. There's a very deep feeling. They know that they're kind of falling in love with each other, but then something happens to Catherine's dad, and Elliot's mom tells him she doesn't want him there anymore. They're totally unrelated, kind of. And we kind of jump forward to when they're 18. Catherine is running a bed and breakfast with her mother, and Elliot comes back to her school, but she's not ready to forgive him yet. So it's kind of him working to gain her trust. Now, you see this is a thick book. That's like the first 200 pages. The rest of the book, some girl goes missing. The mean girl at school goes missing. They think Catherine and Elliot had something to do with it because she's her bully. And Catherine has, like, no friends, and then she starts making friends. Her mom is very closed off. There's these very odd guests in the house. And I'm going to put it here. Like, there's these very odd guests who stay in the house, and some of them are very angry and aggressive. Some of them are very nice. Some of them are children. I'm putting a spoiler warning here now if you don't want to hear about the rest of this, because this book is not actually a romance. It's a romance thriller. So if you don't want to hear the spoiler part to the thriller, just skip forward a little bit. And I'll put something that'll say, like, spoiler free. Okay, I'll give you a couple seconds to scroll forward. This girl goes missing. They're blaming Elliot and Catherine. However, come to find out, one man tells Catherine, like, don't go downstairs. I don't want you in the basement. And she just is kind of like, okay, like, I don't want to piss him off because he's very aggressive. He's very scary. Like, he gets very in her face and yells at her a lot. And Catherine interacts with all these different guests, and you start to kind of see that these guests are only ever seen one at a time, and they'll be there 1 minute, and she'll be talking to them, then she'll turn and go do something else. She'll walk out of the room, come back, and be like, well, where'd they go? Oh, well, you just missed them. They just left. And so if you're someone who knows about DID, you can kind of start to put together by the end of the book that Catherine's mother developed DID after her father's death. And essentially, the guests in the bed and breakfast are the personalities. Basically, Catherine's taking care of herself. But before you find that out, she actually ends up going, and she ends up telling her mom, like, as a trade for Elliot not going to jail or not being suspended after he gets in a fight, she tells her guidance counselor that her mom is not taking care of her, and that, you know, she doesn't want to be in the house anymore. So she gets taken away by child services and lives with her guidance counselor. Her mom eventually comes in and attacks the guidance counselor. Now that I did all the spoilery parts, this book is a wild ride. It is truly a thriller romance, even though it very much looks like a romance. I will mention, I talked about in the spoiler part, but I want to put it here too. This book does include DID. However, I did not find it to be accurate, or, I mean, it's just not accurate and very kind of stereotypical, especially given that this book came out in like 2018, 2019. Like, we know better. I actually enjoyed the book despite that part. That's the only thing I didn't really love about the book. Other than that, it was super good. The only two books that I haven't gotten to are So This Is Love and The Hunting Wives, and I think I'll just put those as carryover for next month because A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire is super long, and by the time I finish that, even if I finish it in March, I'm not gonna have time to read those two. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you got a lot of reading done this month, and I will see you in the next one.